Hello everyone. On our last video, we talked about what is title. We didn't really talk about it, just a really simple, short title as the proof of the legal owner of a piece of property, right? How do you take title to a piece of property? There's only one vehicle that gives you ownership to a piece of property, and that is a deed, okay? Deeds come in many different forms. You have what's called quitclaim deeds, warranty deeds, special warranty deeds. There's several others we're not going to go too in depth, but ultimately, the deed is the vehicle that gives you ownership to a piece of property. Now, one thing that's very important about a deed is that a deed has this thing called tenancy. Tenancy tells the world how the people who are taking ownership of that property hold ownership. For instance, if you're taking ownership to a piece of property as a husband and wife, the tenancy is going to be tenants by the entirety. That means if something happens to one of the spouses, the surviving spouse automatically takes full ownership of the property. Your next tenancy is joint tenants. Let's say a case where maybe we have a parent and a child in title of a piece of property. Joint tenants is going to be just like tenants by the entirety. It's just not for a husband and wife. Joint tenants, if something happens to one of the owners, the survivor takes full ownership of the property. And then you have another one called tenancy in common. Tenancy in common is one of those scenarios whereas, say maybe you have a investor partner and you're buying a property for investment purposes. Okay, if something happens to you, you don't want your ownership to go to the other person in title. You want your ownership in the property to go to your family or your heirs. Tenancy in common accomplishes that for you, okay? Usually it's going to identify if the ownership is 50-50, 60-40, 75-25, but your ownership goes to your family and your heirs and ultimately through a probate process. And the ownership of the other person, if something was to happen to them, would go to their family and their heirs. So those are the three types of tenancy that's most common. And the fourth one being sole owner. If you're the only one on a piece of property, if you're the only one on the deed, you're going to be a sole owner, which means if something happens to you, ultimately your estate has to be probated to determine heirs and who's going to take ownership as your survivor. All right. For more in-depth questions about deeds, how to get them recorded, tenancy, etc., I'm always here to assist folks. I'm going to call away 443-805-4776 or by email mreese@clatitle.com. Stay safe, folks. Take care.